Hi there. Today, we're diving into the grim irony and everyday darkness of a medieval village and telling the story of an ordinary blacksmith, one of those invisible heroes who couldn't afford a moment of leisure or a pair of clean hands. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I'm really curious to see who's joined us today. Now, get cozy because we're about to begin. You wake up before the rooster, or to be more accurate, the rooster wakes up after you because even the bird with the loudest mouth in the village does not see any sense in greeting this kind of day earlier than absolutely necessary. But you do. You do because, as a blacksmith in the medieval countryside, you are not granted the luxury of oversleeping. There is always something to be hammered, something to be mended, or something to be cursed under your breath while you sweat in the darkness. Your bed is made of straw, or rather, it is a sack stuffed with the leftovers of last autumn's harvest, layered with something that might have once been linen, but which now is closer in texture to burlap. The straw pokes you in the ribs, the back, and in places not polite to mention, and every shift you make in your half sleep is accompanied by a chorus of creaks and the gentle scrape of straw against your skin. You have gotten used to it, or at least, you have convinced yourself that you have. Your wife sleeps beside you, snoring softly, wrapped tightly in the single blanket that you share. She smells of smoke, sweat, and something earthy, a combination that you are all too familiar with. She too will be up soon, beginning the ceaseless routine that is the life of a peasant woman. The children, somewhere across the one room house, are bundled together for warmth, a tangle of limbs, hair, and old woolen rags. They will not sleep much longer either. Your eyes open to the darkness. The only light is the faintest blue-gray smudge on the horizon, promising dawn. You listen, for a moment, to the sound of the world, the breathing of your family, the muffled groans of the cow in the lean-to, the distant bark of a dog that never seems to sleep. Your own breath is heavy, thickened by the remnants of yesterday's smoke, and your throat is as dry as last year's bread. You rise slowly, every joint protesting the movement. Your knees ache, your back protests. Your hands, knotted and swollen, nails blackened by years of work, are stiff, and it takes a few moments before your fingers can do anything but clench. Somewhere inside, you are younger, but the body does not care for such fantasies. You are not old by the standards of history, but by the standards of this life, you are ancient. There is no time for reflection. You dress in silence, pulling on your shirt, which is more patch than cloth, and trousers that sag at the knees. Your boots are precious, so you leave them off for now. The floor is cold, packed earth, scattered with straw, and the detritus of another night. Somewhere in the corner, a mouse scurries, and you wonder idly whether it found anything to eat, since you certainly did not. Your wife stirs, her eyes blinking open. There is no greeting, no gentle morning exchange, just a grunt, a nod, and the unspoken acknowledgement that the day has begun and it will not end until it is finished with you. The children mutter and whimper, clinging to the warmth of each other as if they could hold back the cold and the work that awaits them just a little longer. You splash your face with the water from the bucket by the door. It is icy, drawn last night from the well, and tastes faintly of iron. You have long stopped worrying about the odd things floating in it. Bits of straw, a fleck of mud, perhaps a memory of a drowned bug. You wipe your hands on your trousers, feeling the rough fabric scrape against your skin. The first task of the day is to check the fire in the hearth. You pray, silently and with no real hope, that there are still some embers alive, hiding under the ashes. If not, it will take precious time to get it going again, and every moment lost to the cold is a moment you will not get back. You prod at the ashes, coaxing a tiny glow to life, feeding it with straw, blowing gently until at last a thin, smoky flame rises. You feel a moment's satisfaction, quickly extinguished by the realization of how much of the day is left. The rooster, sensing that you have beaten it to the start of the day, finally decides to make its presence known. Its crow is shrill, insistent, and you cannot help but feel it is mocking you. Another day in paradise, it seems to say. You gather your tools, as much a part of you as your hands, and prepare to step out into the morning. The air outside is sharp, carrying the scents of smoke, manure, and the damp promise of another long, unchanging day. Somewhere, a dog barks again. The world is waking up, whether you want it to or not. You pause, just for a heartbeat, to look at the sky. It is the same as it was yesterday and as it will be tomorrow. You take a breath, steeling yourself for what comes next. In this life, there is no rest, only the brief interludes between work and sleep, and the knowledge that the cycle will begin again with the next sunrise. You are a blacksmith. This is your life. Welcome to another day. The first real test of your resolve comes not from the fire or from the weight of the hammer, but from the simple, inescapable matter of hygiene. Hygiene, of course, is not a word you have ever heard. Cleanliness, as it is practiced in some future century of scented soaps and porcelain bathtubs, is as far from your reality as flight to the moon. Here, in this stifling little house, with one window that does not open and a roof that does not quite keep out the rain, you wash only because you must, not because you ever feel truly clean. The water you use for your morning wash sits in a wooden bucket by the door, and every member of the family, in order of their status and stamina, takes a turn dipping their hands and splashing their face. You, as the blacksmith, are theoretically the head of the household, but this only means you get the water after your wife and before the older children. The little ones come last, by which time the water is often more brown than clear. You do not question this. You do not think of things like germs or bacteria. You have never heard the word infection. You have, however, seen your neighbor lose his hand to a festering wound, and you know better than to poke too closely at the scab on your knuckle. There is a faint, rusty taste to the water, and when you peer into the bucket, you see bits of straw, some mud, and a thin slick of something green floating along the rim. You splash it on your face anyway, rubbing at the grit in your eyes and the sweat on your brow. It does not help. You have not brushed your teeth in your life. You have heard that some priests and the very wealthy rub their teeth with a linen cloth and wine, but that is as foreign to you as eating off a silver plate. You run your tongue over your teeth, feeling the roughness, the grit, and a loose molar in the back that aches when you bite. The taste in your mouth is a mixture of last night's stew, this morning's breath, and something indefinably metallic that never quite goes away. You spit into the straw at your feet and move on. You relieve yourself outside behind the shed where the ground is churned into mud by years of similar rituals. The pit is not far from the well, a fact you prefer not to dwell upon. The smell is sharp and omnipresent, but you have long since stopped noticing. When you were a child, it made you gag. Now, it is as much a part of your life as the sound of the anvil or the heat of the fire. There is no such thing as soap, or rather, there is soap, but it is reserved for washing clothes, never for skin. Your wife boils fat and ashes together once a month in a cauldron that serves as the heart of the household's cleanliness, such as it is. The result is a gray, crumbly substance that smells worse than it cleans and leaves your hands raw and stinging. On festival days, perhaps you might rub a bit behind your ears, but only if someone is watching. Your nails are black, rimmed with soot and dirt, so deeply ingrained that you sometimes wonder if it is simply part of you now. You can remember a time, vaguely, when your mother would scrub your hands until you cried, but she is long gone, and the memory, like cleanliness, fades quickly. You look at your family. Your wife braids her hair, smoothing it with spit. She pulls her dress over her head, grimacing at the stains and patches. But she is practical. The dress will be clean enough until it is so dirty cannot be worn, and then she will cut it into rags for cleaning tools or wrapping wounds. The children are even less fastidious. They wipe their noses on their sleeves, their faces streaked with yesterday's mud and last week's bruises. There is a kind of comfort in this universal grime. You are no dirtier than your neighbors, and so no one notices. When the Lord's steward rides through the village, his boots shining, his cloak spotless, you watch him from the shadow of your doorway and wonder if he has ever had to share winter with a dog. You suspect not. Breakfast comes next, but there is no hand washing for that. You sit at the table, such as it is, a plank on barrels, without ceremony. The bread is hard enough to chip a tooth, the bowl of porridge thin and lumpy, but you eat with the gusto of a condemned man. There is no time to savor, there is barely time to chew. The house smells of smoke, sweat, and yesterday's stew. In the corner, a cat licks itself with studied indifference, the cleanest creature in the house, by far. You envy it for a moment before remembering that it too survives on scraps and luck. There is a certain kinship in filth. When breakfast is over, you wipe your hands on your trousers and feel the familiar, sticky sensation of old grease and new grime. You do not complain. Complaints are wasted breath, and you need every bit of air for the bellows. You have learned over years to accept that this is not a life for comfort or vanity. There is a kind of freedom in filth, you tell yourself. A lie, but a comforting one. You are too tired to believe anything else. And so, your morning hygiene is finished, such as it is. A splash of dirty water, a handful of mud wiped from your face, and the knowledge that tomorrow will be the same. You step outside, blinking at the new day, and feel the dirt settle on your skin, a second, more honest skin that will never quite come off. The world is waiting, and it is just as dirty as you are. You have eaten breakfast every day of your life, and yet each morning you discover anew how uninspiring this ritual is. Breakfast, as you know it, is not a celebration. It is not an occasion. It is simply a line you cross each dawn so that you do not fall over before the sun is even halfway through the sky. The meal is waiting for you, though waiting implies a kind of anticipation that does not really exist. It is just there, inevitable as mud. Your wife, already alert and practical, has reheated last night's porridge over the stuttering fire, scraping at the sides of the pot to coax out enough for everyone. The pot itself is a battered thing, stained with the ghosts of 100 meals and dented from more than one argument with gravity. Your children descend on the table like a pack of crows, elbowing each other for the largest share, which of course does not exist. Everything is already measured, already divided, already just enough. The oldest boy gets a slightly bigger scoop. The smallest girl stares at her bowl as if she might find a surprise at the bottom. She will not. There are never surprises in peasant porridge. The bread, which sits at the center of the table, is several days old, as all bread in the village is. It is hard, truly hard, not the sort of crunchy that town merchants brag about, but stone like, a tool as much as a food. You have seen people use it to wedge open doors, to prop up table legs, to pacify teething babies. You take a knife, whose edge you yourself restored only last week, and saw at the loaf flakes of crust scattering onto the table, onto the floor, into the creases of your clothes. You tear off a piece, chew thoughtfully. The bread tastes like what it is: grain, salt, a memory of yeast. Sometimes, if you are lucky, there are caraway seeds or onions. This is not one of those days. It is simple, honest bread, and it will do its job. Keep your stomach from howling as you bend over the anvil. On good days, there is something extra, perhaps a sliver of lard or a piece of smoked fish from the market. Today, you are not blessed with such extravagance. Instead, you get the usual, a thin slice of pork fat, white and streaked with salt, cut so fine that you can see the wooden table through it if you hold it up to the light. You lay it on your bread, press it down, and eat in silence. You chew for a long time, not because you are savoring the food, but because your jaw is slow to wake and your teeth ache in protest. The bread is dry, the lard greasy, the porridge bland. Still, you eat. You always eat, because not eating is a sort of luxury, the kind you cannot afford. Hunger is a constant companion in your life, a shadow that follows you even when your belly is technically full. Your wife pours out the last of the goat's milk into chipped mugs, distributing them with the precision of someone who has spent her whole life making not enough stretch a little farther. The milk is slightly sour, with a tang that is more pronounced than you would like, but you drink it anyway. It washes down the porridge, the bread, the salt, leaving an aftertaste of grass and animal. There is no sugar. Sugar is something you have heard about, a wonder from distant lands, as rare as gold and twice as precious. Sometimes, when you are especially lucky, you might come across a jar of honey, its thick golden sweetness reserved for the very young or the very ill. Not today. Today, there is nothing sweet about your breakfast or your life. You look around the table. Your children eat with the ferocity of the hungry, scraping every last bit from their bowls, licking spoons, fingers, even the inside of the wooden mugs if no one is watching. Your wife eats quickly, efficiently, already thinking ahead to the next meal, the next task, the next demand. You eat slowly, each bite weighed down by memory and anticipation, because you know that the day ahead will not be any easier for having eaten. Sometimes you allow yourself to remember stories you heard as a child, tales of feasts and plenty, of roasted meats and steaming pies, of rivers that run with cream and forests thick with berries. You think of these things, and then you look at your own breakfast, at the thinness of the gruel, the hardness of the bread, and you laugh quietly so as not to disturb the others. The fire pops, and a small puff of smoke snakes into the room. The cat, curled near the embers, lifts its head, yawns, and returns to sleep. It is, you reflect, the most contented member of the household. It eats what it wants, sleeps where it likes, and never once worries about the harvest or the taxes or the bite of hunger in the winter. You, on the other hand, are always calculating, always counting, always scraping the pot for the last scrap of food. Breakfast ends the way it always does, with nothing left. The pot is empty, the bread reduced to crumbs, the mugs rinsed with a precious splash of water. You stand, brush crumbs from your lap, and stretch, feeling your joints creak and pop. Your family does the same. There is no time to linger. Lingering is for those with leisure, and you have none. You glance at your children, at your wife, at the empty table. There is a look you all share, the look of people who have eaten enough to go on, but not enough to hope. You know that tomorrow's breakfast will be much the same, and the next day, and the next. Perhaps, if the harvest is good, there will be a chicken to roast, or some apples to slice. But you do not count on it. Counting on anything is a fool's game in this world. The morning meal has served its purpose. You are not hungry anymore, not exactly. You are not full either, but that is not something you expect. You are simply less empty than you were, and that is enough. You gather your tools, the blackened iron and battered wood that are as familiar to you as your own hands. The day's work awaits, indifferent to your hunger or fatigue. You step out into the yard, the taste of salt and grain still lingering on your tongue, and look up at the sky, gray and unpromising. Another day begins, another breakfast done, another debt to your own survival paid. You think perhaps that tomorrow's breakfast will taste better, but you know it will not. You step out into the morning, clutching your handful of tools, each one a relic of previous generations, and the cold hits you full in the face. The sun has barely dragged itself above the horizon, as if it, too, would rather stay buried under a heap of straw than greet the day that awaits. But you do not have a choice. The forge does not come to you. You must go to it. There is no path to your forge. Not really. There is only the mud, churned by years of footsteps, horse hooves, and the indifferent passage of time. It squelches under your bare feet, because of course you do not wear your boots for this short journey. Boots are precious as a week without rain, as precious as a meal with meat. The leather is cracked and thin in places, patched with scraps, stitched and restitched until there is more thread than hide. If you wore them for every trip between the house and the forge, you would be barefoot all winter. Instead, your feet know the mud, the cold, the occasional sharp bite of stone or hidden thorn. They are tough, calloused, permanently stained. In the summer, they swell and sweat. In the winter, they freeze and crack. And at all times, they are filthy. When you were a child, you cried over every scratch, every stubbed toe. Now you accept pain as the cost of walking, and you step with the careful indifference of the long suffering. You cross the yard, past the vegetable patch that never quite produces enough, past the heap of manure that promises better crops next year, past the chickens that scatter at your approach. They cluck disapprovingly, as if they know you have no more control over your fate than they do over theirs. You are both prisoners, you and the chickens, condemned to your own routines, waiting for the axe to fall. The air is thick with the smells of the village, damp earth, burning wood, manure, the sweet rot of compost. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, and a baby begins to cry. The village is waking up, and every sound is both familiar and inescapable. You know every cough, every shriek, every creak of every door within 5 houses of your own. Privacy is for the rich, and even then, only if their walls are thick enough. You nod to the neighbors, who are also beginning their days, stooped figures tending to goats, women hauling water, children dragging themselves toward the fields. There are no greetings, not really. A grunt, perhaps, or a nod, or just a mutual look that says, "Yes, I am still alive, and so are you. Congratulations for what it is worth." There is no energy for small talk, no room for idle conversation in a day that is already too full. Your forge is not far, but the journey always feels long. The mud is heavy, clinging to your toes, and the cold has a way of seeping up through your soles and into your bones. On rainy days, the road becomes a river, and you arrive with your feet already soaked, already numb. On dry days, the dust cakes your ankles, rises in clouds, settles in your nostrils, and between your teeth. You reach the door of your forge, a door in name only, a slab of warped wood set into a frame that was never quite square, hanging crooked on one hinge. You push it open, and the familiar darkness greets you. The forge itself is a squat, smoky building, its roof patched with whatever you could find: thatch, boards, even bits of old leather. In the winter, the wind finds every crack, every hole. In the summer, the heat presses against the walls until you think the whole place might melt. Inside, it smells of old smoke and older sweat. The soot is thick on every surface, blackening the beams, the stones, even the cobwebs in the corners. You breathe it in with every breath, and sometimes you wonder what your lungs look like, probably as black as the anvil, the bellows. Your constant companions hang beside the fire, waiting to be bullied into life. You drop your tools on the battered workbench, if you can call a plank on bricks a workbench, and look around. Everything is gaunt as you left it. The hammer with the cracked handle, the tongs with the warped jaws, the pile of nails you finished yesterday, already claimed by a neighbor who will pay next week. The bucket of water, more mud than water, for quenching red hot metal and burned skin alike. You know the first task of the day awaits you: coaxing the fire into life, wrestling with damp wood and stubborn coals, urging heat into a reluctant world. But for a moment, you just stand in the doorway, staring at your kingdom, a kingdom of soot and iron and exhaustion. Some mornings, you allow yourself to dream of a different road, a different destination, a town where people pay what they owe, where iron is plentiful, where boots last a lifetime, and you do not go to bed every night with a hunger that never really leaves. But then you blink, and the vision fades. This is your road, your forge, your life. You move inside, feet crunching on old cinders, and close the door behind you. Outside, the village stirs. the world continues, but in here, for the next 12 or 14 hours, it will be just you, the fire, and the endless, unyielding work. You take a breath, deep, smoky, full of promise and threat, and pick up your hammer. The day has truly begun. Inside the forge, the world narrows. Whatever small mercies morning offered, the sharp air, the sight of sun on the rooftops, are gone now, replaced by the heavy, close presence of soot, iron, and unending obligation. You do not think of it as a workplace. It is more like a pit, a cave, a place that chews up hours and years and spits out only more work. You stand in front of the fire pit, that shallow, blackened depression where yesterday's labors smoldered and, if the gods have any kindness left, a few embers remain beneath the ash. You peer into the pit, rake through the soft gray powder with a stick, searching for the faintest glow. Sometimes there is nothing, just cold, dead remnants. Today, you are lucky. You find a flicker, a red whisper of heat buried deep. There is no time for thanks or relief. Every minute the forge stands cold is a minute lost, and minutes are just another thing you cannot afford to lose. You kneel, blow gently on the embers, coaxing them as if they were a stubborn child. Your breath comes back at you thick with the taste of old charcoal and your own fear. If the fire will not catch, nothing else can begin. You gather kindling, scraps of wood saved from weeks before, the odd splintered crate, a bit of dry straw, even a twist of old rags. It is all precious. You never waste anything that will burn. In winter, the competition for fuel is fierce. Your wife eyes every stick that comes near the forge, thinking how much warmer it would make the house. But the work cannot wait for comfort, and neither can you. You arrange the kindling in a careful, practiced pile, strike flint to steel, and pray that today, for once, the sparks will land where you want them. The first spark fizzles on the damp wood. The second barely flickers. By the third or fourth try, your hands are shaking with frustration. You have seen other men lose their tempers, hurl the flint into the wall, curse the gods, their wives, their own bad luck. You do not bother. You learned long ago that anger is wasted here, as wasted as everything else. At last, a spark catches. A sliver of orange crawls up the side of the straw, and smoke begins to coil in the still air. You crouch, eyes stinging, and blow softly, feeding life into the reluctant flame. It shudders, flares, then subsides. Another breath, another wisp, another silent plea. Eventually, the fire accepts your offering. A tongue of flame licks up, hungrily consuming what little you can spare. Now comes the hardest part, making it last. You add more wood, sparingly, always sparingly, because the wood pile is never full enough. You feed the fire in tiny increments, coaxing it from spark to flame, from flame to heat. The air inside the forge changes. It grows warm, then hot, then stifling. Sweat beads on your forehead, trickles down your back. The smoke climbs upward, searching for an exit, and most of it finds your lungs instead. You grab the bellows, those old patched things, the handles worn smooth by years of use. They are heavier than you remember, or perhaps you are just older than you care to admit. You squeeze, and a great breath of air blasts into the fire. The flames leap up, greedy and wild, roaring for more. The bellows groan and creak, but you do not stop. You work them with the rhythm of a man who has nothing else left. Pull, press, pull, press, until your arms ache and the fire glows white hot. The forge, once cold and dead, is alive now. You feel the heat on your face, see the colors shift in the coals, deep red, then orange, then the dazzling, dangerous white that means the work can begin. You are sweating freely, but you do not wipe your brow. There is no point. In a few minutes, the sweat will be replaced by soot, and by noon, both will have become a kind of second skin. All this just to begin, all this before a single piece of iron is even placed on the coals. Sometimes you wonder how many hours of your life you have spent just making the fire live, how many days stolen by the bellows and the smoke. You wonder, but you never count. Counting would only make it worse. You look around the forge. It is lit by fire and little else. A few thin rays of morning sunlight pierce through cracks in the wall, illuminating motes of dust and ash that swirl endlessly in the heated air. Every surface is black, black from soot, black from use, black from years of indifference. The tools hang on their pegs, each one marked by your hand, by your father's hand, by his father's before him. Some are barely tools anymore, just the ghost of a hammer, the suggestion of a pair of tongs. But you know them all. You know their quirks, their weaknesses, the sound they make when they are about to break. You take up your favorite hammer, the one with the chipped handle and the head worn smooth. It is almost useless now, but you trust it. It has seen you through 100, 1,000 days like this one. It feels right in your grip, heavy and balanced, a partner in the dance of sweat and fire. There is work waiting, a list of tasks longer than the daylight. Plowshares to mend, horseshoes to shape, a kitchen knife for the widow 2 houses down, who always pays with eggs, never coin. But before any of that, you allow yourself a single moment, just one, to stand in the heat and listen to the roar of the fire. This, at least, is yours. The heat, the effort, the breathless anticipation of work. Nobody can take it from you, not the tax man, not the Lord, not even the indifferent sky above. Your lungs burn, your arms tremble, your back protests with every movement. The fire is alive now, as alive as you are, and as hungry. It will not rest, and neither will you, not until the last job is finished and the last ember dies. You glance at the door, at the thin strip of daylight outside and wonder, just for a heartbeat, what life would be if it were not measured by fire and ash and endless beginnings. But the thought is gone as quickly as it comes. There is work to do. There is always work to do, and the fire does not wait. In your forge, tools are more than objects. They are relics, burdens, and barely loyal companions in your daily grind. Each one has a story, though none of the stories have a happy ending. The hammer you hold was once new, back when you still believed that new meant better. Now, it is just less broken than the rest. You survey your collection, if the word collection can be used for this sorry pile. The tongs hang on a rusted nail, their jaws gaping unevenly, like a mouth missing most of its teeth. One handle is wrapped in a strip of leather from an old boot, tied tightly where the iron split after a winter too cold to forgive mistakes. Every time you grip it, you feel the promise that one day it will give way, and that day will be the worst sort, one where you need it most. The anvil is the heart of your forge, but it is as flawed as the rest. The surface was flat once, long before you were born. Now it is pitted, uneven, and leans ever so slightly to the left, the way your back does after too many years. The edge is chipped from an accident you pretend not to remember, and there is a deep groove in the middle, polished smooth by endless blows. When you work, the iron sings against it, a flat, tired song that only you can hear. Your chisels are little more than memories of iron. They are shorter than they once were, ground down to dull nubs. You try to keep them sharp, but every time you use them, they lose a little more of themselves. You remember when you had a set, a real set, every size and shape. Now you are lucky to have three that can still cut without crumbling. Sometimes, when a neighbor comes to borrow one, you feel a surge of anger so sharp you almost laugh. You know you will not see it again, or if you do, it will return blunter than before. There is the punch you use to make holes for rivets and nails, a stubby, awkward thing bent from the time a village boy brought you a horseshoe and asked if you could make it better. You could not, but you tried, and the punch has never been straight since. There are your files, too, though file now means any piece of metal with a jagged edge. The teeth are worn smooth, so you press harder and harder still and curse when the iron refuses to cooperate. The bellows, your most important tool, are as patched and scarred as your hands. The leather is cracked and stitched, the handles splintered and wrapped with rags. They leak, wheeze, and complain, but they are still better than nothing. Every time you pull and press, you wonder if this is the day they finally give up. When that day comes, you know you will spend hours, maybe days, patching them yet again, because buying new ones is a dream for someone with more money and fewer problems. You have a small box for nails and rivets. It was once a fine thing, carved by your grandfather, its lid decorated with an animal you cannot quite recognize. Now it holds only the nails that are too bent or too short for anyone else to use. When you are desperate, you straighten them, hammering them flat against the anvil and telling yourself that it is just as good as new. It never is, but it is good enough to hold a plow together for another season. Even your workbench is a survivor. It sags in the middle, propped up on one end by a stone you stole from the crumbling church wall. Every time you lean on it, it reminds you that nothing lasts forever. Not benches, not stones, not churches. There is a drawer that sticks and a leg that wobbles. You have promised yourself every year that you will fix it. You never do. There is always something more urgent, more broken, more in need of your dwindling time. You are not alone in this misery. Every blacksmith in every nearby village works with tools just as battered, just as likely to betray them at the worst moment. When you meet them at market or in the tavern, you compare scars on your hands, on your hammers, on your souls. Sometimes you dream of what it would be like to have a whole set of new tools, straight and sharp and loyal. But then you remember what tools cost and what you earn, and the dream fades like the smoke from your chimney. There is a constant, quiet war with your tools. They break, you patch them. They bend, you hammer them straight. They dull, you file and grind and pray they will last another day. Every victory is temporary, every solution a stopgap. You know deep down that the only thing keeping them together is your own stubbornness and the knowledge that nobody else will fix them for you. Sometimes the tools fight back. A hammer slips, pinching the flesh between your thumb and forefinger. A chisel cracks, sending a shard of iron spinning dangerously close to your eye. You have lost count of the cuts, bruises, and burns, each one a reminder that the work does not care about you, and neither do the things you work with. You are not sentimental. You do not give your tools names or talk to them as if they are friends. But you respect them in the way a prisoner respects the bars of his cell. They are the only things standing between you and total ruin. You cannot work without them, and you cannot live without work. Sometimes, at the end of a long, punishing day, you sit in the dark forge and run your hands over the worn handles, the chipped steel, the battered anvil. You think about your father's hands and your grandfather's and the generations of blacksmiths who came before you, each one wrestling with tools that never quite did what they were supposed to do. You wonder if they hated their hammers as much as you do, or if they found some comfort in the endless grinding battle. You do not know the answer, and you are too tired to care. There is always another thing to fix, another edge to sharpen, another handle to bind. The tools will never be perfect, and neither will you. But tomorrow you will pick them up again, because that is what you do and what you have always done. You will patch, repair, adjust, and improvise, fighting the slow decay of iron and wood with whatever energy you have left. You will curse your tools, and you will rely on them, and together you will survive another day in the forge, just barely. You do not get to choose your first job of the day. You almost never get to choose any job at all. The people of the village choose for you, and the world decides the rest. Today, as on most days, it is a plow that needs fixing. Again, you sigh, shoulders heavy, but you do not hesitate. The plow is waiting outside, propped against your door like a threat. It belongs to old Janek, the farmer whose fields never seem to yield quite enough, and whose debts to the miller are as deep and wide as the cracks in the village road. Janek brought the plow at dawn, banging on your door with his fist, voice already worn thin by worry. If you cannot fix it, blacksmith, he said, I do not know what I will do. As if your hands can conjure miracles from rot and rust, you drag the plow into your forge. The wooden handles are splintered, the metal blade bent and nicked. It is the same plow you fixed last month, and the month before, and the month before that. Every time you see it, there is a little less left to save. But Janek cannot afford a new one, and neither can you. You examine the damage, poking at the blade with a practiced finger. The iron is thin, almost brittle in places, worn down by years of abuse and neglect. The edge, which once sliced clean through earth and root, is jagged, curled, more suggestion than reality. You wonder how much longer you can patch and pound it before there is nothing left to mend. You set to work. First, you pry the blade loose from the wood, being careful not to snap what remains of the old pegs. The handle creaks and groans in protest, threatening to fall apart at the gentlest touch. You mutter curses at Jonik, at the wood, at yourself, but the words are nothing new. The forge has heard it all before. You lay the blade on your battered anvil, feeling its unevenness beneath your hands. The hammer comes down, methodical and steady. Sparks fly, little bursts of light in the gloom, but you do not notice. Your arm moves with the slow, weary rhythm of repetition, each blow an echo of every other morning, every other plow, every other lost cause. Sometimes the metal protests, refusing to bend, refusing to forget the shape it has learned from seasons of hardship. You heat it, quench it, heat it again, pounding out the worst of the bends, though you know you cannot erase the years. Each time you lose a little more iron, and the blade grows thinner still. While you work, you remember other plows, other blades, other mornings, just like this one. You remember when you were young and foolish enough to think that every repair was a small victory, that every mended tool meant another season, another harvest, another chance. Now you know better. Every repair is just a delay, a stay of execution. The plow will break again. So will the man who owns it. The forge grows hotter. Your arms ache. Your shoulders burn. Sweat runs down your face, stinging your eyes, mixing with the soot. The hammer slips, skidding off the iron, and you bite your tongue to keep from swearing too loudly. You hear the voices of the villagers outside, drifting through the cracks in your walls. Someone laughs, someone shouts, a dog barks, then yelps. You do not look up, you do not pause. The plow demands your full attention, your best work, though you know it deserves neither. You file the edge, scraping away the last of the roughness, listening to the scrape and hiss. It is not sharp, not really, but it is less dull than before, and that will have to do. You turn your attention to the handles. The wood is dry, riddled with cracks, but you bind it with a strip of old leather and some thin iron bands, hoping it will hold for one more planting. You drive in new pegs, straightening the frame, testing the weight. It is lopsided, awkward, but then again, so is Janek. By the time you finish, your hands are shaking. You look at your work with tired eyes, seeing not a tool, but a corpse dressed for another day in the field. You know Janek will not be happy. He will grumble about the cost, about the shape, about how it is not as good as it once was. But he will take it because he has no choice. Neither of you do. You drag the plow outside and lean it against the wall, the same spot where it stood this morning. You wipe your hands on your trousers, leaving black streaks on already filthy cloth. The world outside has grown brighter, the sun crawling higher, but the day feels no lighter. Soon, Janek will return, coins clutched tight in his dirt-caked hands, though not enough, never enough. He will count them out one by one, looking at you the whole time, as if daring you to ask for more. You will not. You know he does not have it. Sometimes he pays with eggs, or a promise, or nothing at all. Sometimes you simply add it to the tally, the growing list of debts that no one in the village ever truly pays. You watch the plow for a moment, feeling nothing at all. There is no pride in this work, only the dull certainty that tomorrow, or next week, or next month, it will be back again, worse than before. You wonder how many more times you can fix it, how many more seasons you can stretch this farce before the metal is gone, the wood is gone, the hope is gone. You know the answer, even if you do not say it out loud, as long as it takes, and not a day longer. You turn back to the forge. There are more jobs waiting, a horseshoe to be shaped, nails to be made, a door hinge to be repaired. The day has barely begun, and already you are tired, but you keep moving, keep hammering, keep pretending that this work matters. You keep pretending that you are not just staving off the inevitable, holding back the collapse for one more miserable season. This is your life. This is your craft. You fix what you can, patch what you must, and pray that nothing else breaks before the day is done. You hear Janek's footsteps in the mud, slow and heavy. You do not look up. You know what he will say, and you know what you will answer. The dance never changes, only the dancers grow older, weaker, more desperate. The plow stands newly mended, ready to fail again, just like everything else. You would think that a forge is a place of solemn industry, a sanctuary from the chaos of village life. You would be wrong. The forge is a crossroads, half workshop, half public square, and above all, the repository of every rumor, complaint, and scandal that can fit between the cracks in the walls. They come to you, the villagers, like flies to the only drop of honey for miles. Some come with broken tools or horseshoes in need of shaping. Some come with nothing at all but stories, grievances, and a hunger for someone to listen, or at least pretend to. They crowd around the open door, peering into the smoky gloom, hoping to catch a moment of heat, or perhaps the illusion of purpose. The forge is where things are fixed, sometimes plows, more often reputations and truths. You work, hammering iron, while the stories flow. You never ask for news, but it is as inescapable as the soot that coats your lungs. This morning, old Matilda is first. She leans against the frame, her head wrapped in a scarf that has not seen a washtub in months, eyes sharp despite the fog of age. Did you hear? She hisses, as if what she is about to say might change the world. The baker's wife has a new bruise. They say he drinks more than ever, on credit, too. His bread is smaller, and his debts are larger. It is only a matter of time. She spits into the dirt as punctuation. You nod, hammer ringing out a beat for her words. Before you can answer, here comes Bartek, whose only real job seems to be knowing other people's business. There is a fever down by the river, he says, wiping his nose on his sleeve. 2 children dead this week. A third coughing so hard the priest says he can see the devil in it. He glances at your bucket of water as if weighing his own odds. If it comes to this end of the village, we are finished. You know better than to engage. Every week, there is a new plague, a new fire, a new disaster. You have learned that most rumors fade faster than the bruises from a misplaced hammer blow. Still, you listen, because listening is easier than talking, and it costs you nothing but patience. A younger woman appears, her belly already swollen for spring. She carries a basket that once might have held eggs, now just wisps of hay and a broken wooden spoon. The miller's cart lost a wheel last night, she says, half whisper, half boast, right in the middle of the road. They say he cursed so loud the cows stopped giving milk. My cousin swears he saw the devil's hand on the spokes, but I told him it was just bad luck and bad wood. She pauses. Can you fix it when he comes? You nod, not bothering to say you have fixed the miller's wheels more times than you have counted. In this village, wheels break, milk sours, and bad luck travels faster than the wind. People want someone to blame, and if it is not the devil, it might as well be the miller or the blacksmith if you are unlucky. The rumors swirl and eddy as the morning wears on. Someone saw footprints in the fields, too large for any man, too fresh for a ghost. The village priest was seen arguing with the steward, voices raised, faces red. The tanner's daughter has not been home in 3 nights, and her father is sharpening his knives. Every story is half truth, half invention. Every story is more interesting than the reality of pounding iron and choking smoke. You keep working, pretending not to care, but you listen. Of course, you listen. The stories are a lifeline, a way to measure time when the sun and the seasons all look the same. Sometimes you remember a tale from months before when someone said the harvest would be good, the taxes would be light, or the rain would come early. None of those things happened, but the stories filled the silence, and silence, as you know, can be dangerous in a place like this. Even the children have news. They slip in through the gaps in your fence, eyes wide, cheeks dirty. The baker's dog bit the butcher's boy, they shout, as if this is the beginning of a war. He cried so loud, his mother dropped a whole loaf on the floor. The children giggle, darting away before you can scold them for playing near the fire. The stories grow darker as the day lengthens. You hear about a cottage near the woods that burned last night, a family of 6, now homeless, taking shelter in the church. They say it was an accident, mutters old Matilda, but I think otherwise. Nobody's that unlucky. Somebody's always to blame. You know she is right, though not in the way she means. In this world, bad luck is as common as dirt and just as hard to wash away. Some gossip is useful, you admit. You hear who owes what to whom, whose pig is sick, whose field is overrun with weeds. You learn which families have a little extra grain, which ones have nothing but hope and empty bellies. Sometimes you trade information for payment. News about a wandering peddler, a stray chicken, a sack of barley gone missing. Information is as good as coin if you know how to use it. But most of the time, the stories are just noise, a background hum to the music of hammer on iron, bellows hissing, fire roaring. You do not remember half of what you hear, and what you do remember is rarely worth the effort. At night, when the village finally falls silent, the stories linger in your mind, twisting and turning, weaving together into a tapestry of worry, fear, and the faintest hope. You finish the last of your morning's work, another hinge, another knife, and wipe your hands on your apron. The villagers drift away, their stories spent for now. Some leave with patched tools or new complaints. Some leave empty handed, but no one ever leaves satisfied. Satisfaction is as rare as honesty in the village, and you have given up looking for either. You look out over the muddy street, the fields beyond, the smoke curling up from crooked chimneys. Somewhere a rooster crows again, late and confused. You wonder what new rumors tomorrow will bring, what new disasters, what new small hopes. You know that none of it will matter in the end. Not really. But you listen anyway, because in a world like this, the stories are all you have. There is a theory somewhere in the world that every craftsman deserves a proper break. You do not live in that world. Here, in your forge, a break is not a moment of peace, but a pause dictated by necessity, by the shaking of your hands, the lightness in your head, the stubborn growling of your stomach that even the roar of the bellows cannot drown out. You do not sit at a table for this meal. There is no table in the forge, and the thought of tracking soot and ash back to the house is enough to make your wife's scowl darken for a week. Instead, you find the least filthy spot, perhaps a low bench, perhaps a pile of wood scraps not yet claimed by the fire, perhaps just a section of floor where the grime is thin enough to pass for clean. The food is what you manage to grab before stumbling out at dawn. A crust of yesterday's bread, harder now than it was at breakfast, wrapped in a scrap of cloth that smells faintly of onions and iron. If you are lucky, there is a sliver of smoked meat, tough as old boot leather, or a piece of dried apple that your youngest hid and forgot last autumn. More often, there is only bread, always bread, as enduring and unchanging as the dirt beneath your feet. You break the crust with hands stained black, your fingernails rimmed in soot and iron filings. There is a crunch as you bite down, and for a moment you worry you have lost another tooth, but the pain is familiar and therefore nothing to fear. The bread is dry, almost flavorless, a distant memory of wheat and salt, but it sits in your stomach like a promise you will not faint before midday, not today. If you are blessed, there is a mug of something to drink, water that spent too long in the bucket and tastes of wood and old coins. Or, if the mood is festive, a swallow of thin, sour ale or weak mead left over from some long ago celebration. You sip slowly, letting the liquid wash the dust from your throat, trying not to think of the things that might be floating unseen in every gulp. The truth is, whatever lives in the water is no more dangerous than what waits outside your door. You do not stop working for this break. There is always another blade to shape, another hinge to fit, another horse outside waiting to be shod. So you eat with one hand, the other still wrapped around the hammer, the tongs, the bellows. You chew while you watch the fire, judging the heat by color and scent, calculating how much longer the coals will last before the next round of fuel. Sometimes someone from the village wanders in while you eat. They do not knock. Why would they? The blacksmith belongs to the people as much as the church or the commons. Are you busy? They ask, the question more formality than fact, because they already know the answer. I have a pot that needs mending. It cracked during the night, and I cannot spare the coin for a new one. Or, my old knife has gone dull. Could you take a look? You nod, bread still in your mouth, and add their requests to the endless queue in your mind. You get used to eating on your feet, to swallowing fast, to never tasting anything for long. Sometimes a bit of grit sneaks in with the bread, and you crunch down on sand or a fragment of coal. You do not complain. Complaining is for those with choices, and you have only the next job, the next bite, the next hour before the sun passes overhead. The break lasts as long as your food does, which is never very long. You finish, brush crumbs from your lap, and wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, leaving a streak of black across your cheek. You glance around the forge, making a mental inventory of what must be done before the light fades. Every minute is spoken for. Every second is a debt you pay to the day. You remember stories of merchants in far off towns who sit at midday in shaded courtyards, plates so heaped high with meats and cheese, bread as soft as clouds, wine as red as blood. You have never seen such a meal. You doubt you ever will. Here, there is no such thing as plenty, only just enough, and sometimes not even that. If the day is especially hard, if your hands tremble and your head aches, you allow yourself one small luxury. You sit, just for a moment, and close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is deeper than the shadows in the forge, quieter than the endless clatter outside. You breathe in, breathe out, and for a heartbeat, you are not a blacksmith, not a debtor, not a servant to every demand. You are simply a man, still alive, still fighting, still here, but the moment does not last. The fire hisses, the hammer calls, the village murmurs just outside. You open your eyes, push yourself up, and return to the work. The bread is gone, the water mug empty, and the day presses on, indifferent to your hunger, your exhaustion, your quiet hopes for a rest that never quite arrives. You wonder sometimes if this is all life will ever be, working, eating, barely pausing, never stopping. You suspect it is. In this place, in this time, rest is a fable told to children, a comfort promised but never delivered. Still, you are not dead. And as long as you are not dead, you will keep eating on the run. Keep stealing moments where you can. Keep finding small scraps of peace in a world that offers none. There is work to do. There is always work to do. If you thought the day might ever slow down, you were wrong. There is always another customer. More accurately, there is always another critic, because nobody visits a blacksmith just to say thank you. They come to you for what they need, and when they return, it is only to explain how what you made, fixed, or mended has failed to meet their impossible standards. It starts as soon as you finish your paltry meal. You barely have time to clear the crumbs from your lap before you hear the first of many heavy footsteps at the threshold. The forge has become a confessional for the village's disappointments. Every tool, every horseshoe, every nail that does not outlast eternity is a personal insult, a new reason to scowl. Here is the farmer from across the field. His face is set in a permanent scowl, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. He holds up a plowshare, the same one you patched just last week. It's crooked, he says, jabbing it toward your chest. Lasted 3 days. I could have done better myself with a stone. He does not mention the years of abuse, the rocks in his fields, the mud that never seems to dry. No, to him, the fault is yours. You look at the blade and see the truth. The metal is nearly gone, nothing left to hold a new edge. But you nod, take it back, and promise to do what you can. You do not mention that there is nothing left to fix. That would only spark another argument, another reminder that the blacksmith's job is to make miracles from the impossible. Next is the cooper's wife, arms folded, lips pressed tight. She slams a bucket on your bench, the iron band loose and rattling. It leaks. You said it would not, and yet here I am, mopping the floor every day. What am I to do? Catch rain with my hands? She stares at you, daring you to answer. You know the band was sound when it left your shop, but wood shrinks in the sun. The iron gives under constant use, and nothing, absolutely nothing, stays whole for long. Behind her, a young boy with a sheepish look waits his turn, clutching a kitchen knife with a chipped blade. Mother says it will not cut onions, he whispers, eyes flickering to the shadows behind you. She says you must have dulled it on purpose, so we'd have to come back. The knife is a relic, sharpened down to a sliver. You grind and hone it for the third time this month. The truth is, what the family really needs is a new knife. But new things are for the rich or the lucky, and no one in this village is either. It does not matter. You take each complaint as it comes. You nod, you apologize, you promise to try again. Sometimes you get paid, sometimes you do not. Often, your payment is the privilege of not being shouted at in public, or the vague promise of when the harvest comes in, which it never does, not the way anyone hopes. You have learned to tune out the words and focus on the rhythm, the parade of tools, the endless stream of disappointment. A wheel with a wobble, a horseshoe that pinches, a lock that sticks in the rain. Each item carries a piece of its owner's frustration, as if a broken thing is contagious. By the end of the day, you feel as battered as the tools themselves. Some customers come not to complain, but to haggle. They point to the work you have done: straight nails, a gate latch, a pot hook, and sigh as if you have asked for gold and given only mud. It is not worth what you ask, they say. I could have gotten it cheaper from the next village over. You have heard this story so many times, it almost makes you laugh. There is no other blacksmith for miles, and they know it as well as you do. Still, you nod, take a few coins, if you are lucky, and tell yourself that next time you will stand your ground. You never do. There are the regulars, those who cannot go a week without breaking something, who treat your forge as an extension of their own homes. They bring you cracked axes, bent pitchforks, snapped scythes. You wonder if they are especially unlucky, or simply careless, or if this is just the way of things. Nothing lasts, nothing holds. Everything returns to you for mending and complaint. Even the local steward, a man with more pride than patience, finds fault. He brings a fine lock from the manor house, slams it on your bench and sneers. It sticks in the rain. What are you making here? Locks or paperweights? You repair it, knowing full well that the problem is not your work, but the constant damp, the swelling wood, the rust that seeps in no matter how much oil you use. But the steward is above reason. He takes his lock and leaves without a word of thanks, already thinking of the next thing to blame you for. There are days late in the year when the nights are long and the cold creeps in early, when you see the line of villagers stretching outside your door, each one holding some wounded object, some fresh complaint. They wait in silence, eyes downcast, as if shamed by their own need. And yet, when they reach the front of the line, the mask drops and the scowl returns. They hand you their problems, expecting solutions you cannot provide. Sometimes, when the day is nearly done and the last complaint has been aired, you allow yourself to wonder what it would be like to have a customer who smiles, someone who thanks you, who admires the work, who sees the hours of labor behind each straightened nail and sharpened blade. But such people exist only in stories, stories told by people who have never had to depend on the goodwill of their neighbors to survive another winter. The truth is, in a world where nothing lasts, gratitude is a luxury. People bring you their troubles, and you bear them as best you can. You learn to read faces, to hear the real pain behind the shouted words, the fear that a broken plow means an empty field, that a leaky bucket means another cold night, that a dull knife is one more small indignity in a life full of them. You patch, you mend, you fix what you can, and apologize for what you cannot. The complaints never end, but neither does the work. At the end of the day, you set down your tools, wipe your hands, and look at the stack of coins, eggs, promises, and IOUs left in payment. It is never enough, not really, but it is all there is. The village quiets as dusk falls. The complaints will start again tomorrow, and you will answer them as always, with patience, with resignation, and just sometimes with a spark of bitter humor that keeps you from breaking, too. After all, in this world, everything breaks eventually. There are days when you almost forget that every swing of the hammer, every pull of the bellows, every careless reach for a tool carries risk. But your hands remember. Your hands, scarred and twisted, each finger with its own story. A burn from a coal that rolled the wrong way, a scar from a chisel that slipped, a patch of skin that never healed, right after boiling water spilled down your wrist. You know the dangers better than you know your own family's faces. You wake up stiff and bruised, every muscle a warning that today, too, could end with a trip to the healer if you can afford it, which you almost never can. It starts with the heat. The forge does not care if you are tired, distracted, hungry, or in pain. The fire only wants to consume. One careless step, and you are too close to the coals. A stray spark leaps out, lands on your bare arm, or worse, your neck, and you bite back a curse as flesh sizzles and blisters. Burns are the most common injury, a badge of the trade. You do not count them anymore. You do not treat them either, except for the occasional splash of cold water or the rare miracle of a clean rag. Cuts come next. Your tools are as sharp as you can keep them, and often as dull as you cannot. A slip of the file, a missed blow with the hammer, and the blade you are sharpening finds your thumb instead. Blood mixes with the grime on your hands, and you wrap the wound with whatever is close, usually a dirty cloth or a bit of old leather, because you cannot afford to stop. There is always more work, more iron to shape, more mistakes waiting in the shadows. You have lost count of the number of times you have smashed a finger between hammer and anvil. The pain is sharp, immediate, and familiar. The nail turns black, then falls off, and if you are lucky, it grows back before you do it again. If you are unlucky, it gets infected. You watch your wounds for signs of rot, redness, swelling, the sickly sweet smell of pus. You know the danger. You have seen men lose whole fingers, even hands, to infections that started small and grew while they worked, ignoring the warning signs. Then there are the bigger accidents. Once, the bellows burst, sending a spray of burning cinders across your face and chest. You remember the pain, the way your wife screamed when she saw the burns. For weeks, you could not sleep, could not breathe without agony. You thought you might die, but you did not. No one in the village would have blamed you if you had. Death by fire is almost an occupational hazard. Sometimes, an old tool finally gives up. The handle of a hammer splits without warning, sending the head spinning across the room. If you are lucky, it misses you. If not, you gain another scar, another story, another day spent wishing you had the means to buy new equipment. You do not. You make do with what you have, and the dangers become as ordinary as breathing. The forge is not your only enemy. The iron you work with is heavy, awkward, unwilling. Every time you lift a piece to the anvil, you feel the strain in your back, the ache in your shoulders. Some days you think you can hear your bones grinding together, each joint a rusty hinge, every muscle a frayed rope ready to snap. You keep working anyway. What choice do you have? There are the hidden dangers, too. The slow poisoning of your own body by the soot and smoke that fills the air. You cough, sometimes so hard it feels as if your lungs will burst. At night, you wake up choking, your throat raw, your chest tight. You know of blacksmiths who have simply stopped breathing one day, their lungs turned to stone by years of fire and ash. You know it could happen to you, but you push the thought away. There is work to do. You have seen others fall to the trade. Old Bronislaw, the smith from the next village, who lost his sight after a shard of metal flew up from the anvil and buried itself in his eye. He sits in darkness now, his hands curled in his lap, listening to the forge he can no longer work. Or young Tomek, who tried to shoe a frightened horse and lost 2 fingers to its kick. He works as a farmhand now, slower and poorer, his dreams of forging swords and plows gone with his fingers. There are the injuries you cannot see, pain that lingers long after the wound has healed. Your back aches, your knees creak, your shoulders burn. You walk with a limp some mornings, your body refusing to cooperate. The pain becomes part of you, a constant reminder that this life is not for the weak or the lucky. It is for the stubborn, the desperate, the ones with nowhere else to go. You remember your father's hands, as twisted and scarred as your own. You remember the way he winced when he bent down, the way he favored one leg, the way he used to cough in the night. He never complained. He taught you not to complain either. Complaining does not make the work easier, and it certainly does not pay for bread. Your wife worries, though she tries not to show it. She cleans your wounds as best she can, muttering prayers and curses in equal measure. She tells you to be careful, but you both know caution only goes so far. The forge demands sacrifices, and you pay the price day after day, year after year. Sometimes, when the pain is too much, when the burns sting and the cuts the throb, and your body feels like it might simply give out, you allow yourself to wonder what it would be like to live a different life. A life where work does not leave you broken and bleeding, where every day is not a wager against injury or worse. But that life does not exist. Not for you, not for anyone you know. You keep working because there is always work. You bandage your hands, grit your teeth, and return to the fire. Every scar is a reminder that you survived another day, another disaster, another chance for the world to grind you down. And when someone brings you a tool to fix, a blade to sharpen, a complaint to air, you meet their eyes and say nothing about the pain. You simply nod, take the work, and thank the gods, if only for the chance to suffer again tomorrow. Because in this world, pain is the only certainty, and you are very, very certain. Fatigue in this life is not a single moment of tiredness. It is an ancient, unyielding thing, as present as the mud under your feet and the soot on your hands. Every day, it seeps into you a little more until you are no longer sure where your own weariness ends and the weight of the world begins. You would laugh at the idea of being well rested, but laughter itself is another luxury your bones can no longer afford. By the time the sun is only a dull smear behind the clouds, and the village begins to settle into its own quiet forms of misery, you are already moving slower. Your arms feel as heavy as the anvil. Your back is a slab of wood, too warped to ever be straightened, and your neck has learned a permanent ache from hours bent over stubborn iron. Even your feet, calloused and hardened by years of cold, stone, and endless mud, burn with a constant, dull ache. The fatigue is not merely physical, it is an exhaustion of the mind, too. You forget words, names, promises. You sometimes lose count while hammering out nails, and only realize you have made too many or not enough when the next villager comes with their palm out. There are days when you forget why you entered the forge in the first place, and you stand, blinking, surrounded by the bitter smells of ash and sweat, wondering what task you meant to do. You catch yourself drifting in the middle of a job, staring at nothing, hammer held slack in your hand. The fire hisses and spits, urging you back to movement, but for a moment you are somewhere else, perhaps in a memory of childhood, before you knew what it meant to be tired, or in some imagined future where you might lay your head down without waking, in pain. But the future is always hungry, and the present is always heavier, and so you rouse yourself and get back to work. Your hands tremble with a weakness that feels foreign and embarrassing. Once, you could grip the heaviest hammer for hours without complaint. Now, even the smaller tools leave your fingers numb and tingling. You think about the men you saw as a child, old, bent, barely able to shuffle from house to forge. You remember pitying them, swearing you would never let yourself become like that. Now you realize you have joined their number without even noticing. Meals do little to help. Whatever food you swallow in haste does not bring strength so much as it simply fills the hollow inside you for another few hours. You envy the animals, their ability to simply sleep when they are tired, to lie in the hay or in the mud, untroubled by unfinished work or unpaid debts. For you, sleep is never enough and always too short. At home, your wife sees the fatigue in you, though she does not mention it. Her hands are as worn as yours, her face marked by the same lines of exhaustion. She sits across from you at the evening meal, both of you silent, except for the sounds of chewing and the shifting of aching limbs. The children, somehow still possessed of energy, chase each other through the shadows, but you know that their time will come too. This is a world that will not let anyone keep their strength for long. Your mind begins to play tricks on you. You find yourself losing track of days, confusing one task for another. You dream of working even while you sleep. Endless rows of nails to be hammered, horseshoes to be shaped, broken tools that never quite mend. Sometimes you wake with your hands already clenched as if still gripping the hammer, and the pain shoots up your arms like a warning. The world itself feels heavier each evening, pressing down on your shoulders with invisible hands. Every task seems impossible: carrying water, chopping wood, even standing from the table. You long for rest, but fear it, knowing that tomorrow will demand even more from you, and you will have even less to give. There is a darkness that creeps into your mind, a hopelessness that no fire can burn away. There is no remedy for this fatigue. You have tried everything you know: cold water splashed on your face, a handful of herbs from the wise woman, a stolen hour sitting in the sun. Nothing works. The tiredness is in your bones, in your blood, in every thought. You suspect it is in your soul. Sometimes you wonder if it would be better to stop, to simply lie down in the straw and let the work go undone. Let the iron cool and the debts go unpaid. But you do not stop. You cannot. The world would not let you, and even if it did, you would not know how. This life is all you have known, and it holds you as tightly as the hammer you clutch in your sleep. You think about the stories you heard as a child, tales of heroes who worked great deeds, who built castles, forged swords for kings, changed the course of history. You wonder if they were tired too, or if the stories left out the nights spent staring at the darkness, unable to move, barely able to breathe. You suspect the storytellers simply did not think fatigue was worth mentioning. It is. It is the truest part of your day, the moment when you realize that your body is failing, that you are less than you were, that the only thing keeping you upright is habit and the knowledge that there is no one else to do the work. Even as you write your own story in scars and exhaustion, you hope that someday someone will remember this. The weariness, the relentless, grinding fatigue of being ordinary. Not a hero, not a villain, just a blacksmith, tired and still alive. Tomorrow you will wake again, as tired as you are now, and the cycle will continue. The world will take what it wants, and you will give it, because that is what it means to survive. And in the quiet before sleep finally claims you, if it does, you will wonder, not for the first or last time, if there will ever be a day when you do not feel so impossibly tired. Winter does not arrive with a gentle hush, nor with the soft beauty of falling snow that poets will someday write about. In your world, winter comes like an enemy laying siege to the village, grinding down every defense, prying into every weakness. When the cold creeps in, it is not only the world outside that freezes, it is everything. Your tools, your bones, your hope. Your forge is meant to be a place of heat, but in winter it is a chamber of bitter irony. The fire fights the cold with everything it has, but the walls are too thin, the roof too full of holes, and the stones sweat with a dampness that never quite dries. The frost settles on the anvil, on the bellows, even on your breath. You begin every morning shivering, fingers so stiff you can barely hold the hammer. The iron itself feels colder than death. You drag yourself from your straw bed while the world outside is still black. It is quieter in winter, a silence so deep it presses on your ears, broken only by the whimpering wind or the creak of a branch ready to snap. Your feet touch the icy floor, and your joints protest. Even your wife, who never complains, moves slower, wrapping another rag around her shoulders, lips pressed white. The short walk to the forge is a test. Mud has turned to frozen ruts and hidden ice. The chickens huddle, half dead with cold, and you envy them their ability to sleep through the worst of it. By the time you reach the forge, your hands are numb, and every breath feels like shards of glass. You wonder, as you always do, if this is the winter that finally breaks you. Lighting the fire is twice as hard. The wood is damp, the kindling refuses to catch, and your fingers are too clumsy to strike the flint properly. Your breath hovers in the air, mixing with the smoke that refuses to rise, turning the inside of the forge into a choking fog. You cough, curse, and keep trying. Sometimes it takes an hour just to coax a miserable glow from the pit. Sometimes you nearly give up, but you do not. There is no choice. When the fire finally wakes, it does not bring relief. It is a small, hungry thing, just enough to keep your hands from freezing to the tools, but not enough to warm your bones. The heat clings to the forge pit and leaves the rest of the room as cold as ever. You hold your hands over the flames and remember what warmth used to feel like, a memory as distant as spring. Iron becomes a different creature in the cold. It is stubborn, reluctant, slow to heat, and quick to cool. Every piece you work seems to sap more energy, more time. You find yourself hammering with double the effort, only to see the metal harden before you can shape it. The bellows, stiff and cracked with frost, groan with every pull, threatening to fall apart with each use. Your breath fogs in the air, mingling with the smoke. Your eyes sting, your skin cracks, and you feel the cold settling into places that will never be warm again. You work slower because you have no choice, and every job takes longer than it should. The villagers complain even more in winter, as if the cold is somehow your fault. They need more, stronger nails to mend roofs battered by storms, thicker horseshoes for roads turned to glass, knives and axes sharp enough to cut through frozen meat and wood. And all the while, you are barely able to keep your own hands steady. Winter is the season of breakage. Everything splits, cracks, warps. Doors do not fit their frames. Windows rattle in the wind, carts fall apart on the ice. People bring you their troubles, bundled in layers of wool and desperation, faces pinched with cold and hunger. You see children with blue lips, men with frostbitten fingers, women who have lost what little fat protected them from the wind. You fix what you can, patch what is possible, and the rest you simply watch fall apart. There are days when the cold is so complete you can feel it gnawing at your insides. Your nose runs, your teeth ache, your joints lock up. You lose feeling in your feet, then your legs. You have seen men lose toes, whole feet, after a night too close to the edge of winter. The wise woman sells her concoctions of herbs and grease, but everyone knows they are just a way to pass the time until the thaw. At night, the cold comes into your home. You and your family pile together under blankets and rags, bodies curled tight. The children shiver, your wife mutters in her sleep, and you lie awake, counting the seconds until the sun rises. There is no true rest in winter, only waiting, only surviving. Food grows scarce, bread is harder, thinner, sometimes moldy. The stew is mostly water, flavored with whatever scraps you have left. Your stomach growls and you ignore it, knowing it is better to be hungry than sick. You trade repairs for food whenever you can, an extra turn at the anvil for a handful of beans, a horseshoe for a small shrunken turnip. The dark is longer, too. The day is over before you have finished half your work, and the rest must be done by the dim glow of a candle or the uncertain flicker of the forge fire. Your eyes strain, your hands miss their mark, and the injuries come more often, burns that do not heal, cuts that will not stop bleeding, blisters that freeze and burst. You wrap them in dirty cloth, grit your teeth, and keep working. The worst is the damp. It seeps into everything, the stones, the wood, your very bones. Even the fire cannot drive it out. You find yourself coughing more, the rattle deep in your chest growing louder each day. You know what it means, but there is nothing to be done. The graveyard grows fuller in winter, and you know you are not immune. You wonder sometimes how people in other places survive. Are there lands where winter is gentle, where the sun still shines, where people do not live in fear of the cold? You doubt it. The world is hard everywhere, or so you imagine. But you still dream, in those frozen moments before sleep, of warmth that does not cost pain. When the thaw finally comes, when mud returns, and the first shoots of green push through the gray, the relief is so sharp it almost hurts. But winter leaves its marks. You are thinner, sicker, more tired than ever. Your tools are rusted, your forge battered, your hope stretched thin as a winter sunbeam. But you survived. That is all that matters. In this world, survival is the only victory you will ever know. And even as the cold finally loosens its grip, you know it is never truly gone. Winter is always waiting, just beyond the horizon, ready to remind you how small and fragile you really are. You might think, after months of winter's cruelty, that summer would bring a kind of deliverance. That is what you tell yourself each spring when the last frost finally gives way to mud and the sun rises a little higher in the sky. For a few days, maybe even a week, there is something like hope. The air is soft, the light lingers. The village children run barefoot through the fields, shouting with energy you can no longer remember possessing. But then summer arrives, not gently, but with a fist. The heat descends and thickens the air until it feels like you are breathing through wool. Your forge, always hot, becomes an oven. By midday, the stones are radiating, and the iron itself sweats beneath your hands. You try to convince yourself that at least the cold is gone, but now it is the heat that saps your strength and your will. The work does not stop for the weather. The fields are alive with growth and labor. The animals demand new shoes, and every farmer is suddenly in desperate need of tools that will not break under the weight of an impossible harvest. Sweat pours from your scalp, drips into your eyes, soaks your shirt until it sticks to your skin. Your hands become slick, the hammer harder to hold, and you curse the sun that once seemed so welcome. Inside the forge, the fire is a living thing, greedy and relentless. The bellows groan in the heat, their leather soft and sticky, threatening to tear with every squeeze. You pull, you pump, you sweat, you curse. The flames rise, smoke clings to the rafters, and the heat presses down on you, making your heart pound and your breath come shallow. Sometimes you feel lightheaded, a dizzy spinning that forces you to lean against the wall, eyes closed, counting the beats until you can stand again. Outside, the village simmers in its own discomfort. People come to your door with sunburned faces and voices rough from thirst. The river, swollen and eager in spring, is now sluggish and warm. The wells run low, the buckets fill slower. Water is precious. You ration it for your family and for the forge, using every drop twice before pouring it out. There are days when your only drink is the sweat you lick from your lips. And then there are the flies. They come with the heat, thick as a curse. They are inescapable, buzzing, biting, landing on your face, your hands, your food. They settle on the sweat that beads on your forehead, crawl into your mouth if you are foolish enough to speak, nestle in the corners of your eyes. They swarm the forge, drawn by the heat and the smell of metal and blood. You wave them away, slap at them with blackened hands, but they always return, more persistent than even your most demanding customers. Some days, the flies are so thick you cannot see the iron for the swarm. They land on fresh burns, turning pain into a torment you did not know you could endure. They lay their eggs in scraps of meat and flecks of blood, and you learn quickly to keep every wound covered, every scrap of food hidden or eaten fast. The animals suffer too, cows and horses with tails in constant motion, chickens frantic, pigs rolling in whatever mud they can find just for relief. The heat brings other pests too, mosquitoes rising from the river, biting at any patch of exposed skin, wasps building their nests under the eaves of the forge, ants swarming over anything left too long in one place. You scratch until you bleed, then scratch some more, only to find the bites inflamed and swelling, hot as the forge itself. Infection is a constant risk, but what can you do? There is no escaping the bites, no medicine to ease the itching, only the hope that it will pass. Your sleep is no better. The nights do not cool, not really. You toss and turn on the straw, soaked in your own sweat, haunted by the whine of insects in the dark. The air in the house is heavy, unmoving, and the walls hold the day's heat like a prison. You listen to your family breathing, your wife restless, the children kicking off their blankets and groaning in their sleep. Even the cat is too hot to hunt the mice that scurry along the rafters. With the heat, tempers in the village flare. Arguments break out over buckets at the well, over shares of water, over nothing at all. Everyone is on edge, waiting for the relief that never quite comes. You find yourself snappish too, barking at your own children, at your customers, at your tools when they refuse to cooperate. The the smallest setback, a cracked blade, a missing nail, a forgotten order, feels like an insult, a personal attack from a world gone mad with heat. Sometimes, in the late afternoon, a thunderstorm rolls in, bringing a brief moment of coolness and the hope of rain. But even this is a mixed blessing. The rain turns the road to mud again, floods the forge, and brings out a new breed of biting insect to replace the old. The river rises and threatens to take your tools, your woodpile, your dreams. The only consolation is that you are not alone. Everyone suffers, everyone sweats, everyone swats the same flies and scratches the same bites. You trade stories of misery at the well, at the market, over a rare mug of warm, sour ale at the tavern. There is comfort in the shared suffering, even as there is no relief. You remind yourself again and again that summer will not last forever. The days will shorten, the flies will die, the heat will give way to cold. But even as you long for winter, you remember how you longed for summer only months before, and you laugh bitterly, quietly, at the endless cycle of wishing for what you cannot have. There is no season of comfort here. There is only the work, the heat, the flies, the ache in your bones, and the hope, however small, that you will endure until the next change and the next and the next. In the forge, the fire never pities you, the flies never tire, the sun never shows mercy. You work, you sweat, you suffer. Tomorrow will be the same. And so it goes. Cleanliness is a word you have heard, perhaps whispered by a priest, or spoken with longing by a mother scrubbing a child's face before a holy day. But in your life, cleanliness is a myth, an unattainable luxury for kings and saints. Dirt is not just as part of your world, it is the world. It lives in your skin, under your fingernails, between your teeth, and in the very air you breathe. You begin to notice the smells long before you reach the forge in the morning, because they are everywhere and everything. The sharp tang of manure hangs over the village, especially when the sun warms the dung heaps behind every cottage. The pigs wallow, the cows drop their steaming piles, and the chickens scatter their leavings with every frantic scratch. You step carefully, or not at all, because the ground itself is made of generations of waste, trampled into mud so deep and black it never truly dries. Even the fresh air carries the memory of the night soil, dumped in the ditches after dark and left for the rain to wash away, if it rains. You learn not to breathe deeply as you pass certain corners, to squint against the stinging scent of rot. Fish guts near the river, spoiled milk behind the dairy, offal from the butcher's shed, each place with its own flavor of decay. But the forge itself is the epicenter of filth. You do not notice it at first. The nose, like the spirit, learns to give up hope. But if you ever step outside for more than an hour, the reek that greets you on your return is as familiar as your own name. The soot from the fire settles everywhere, on the walls, on your tools, in the lines of your hands. The floor is a mosaic of old grease, spilled water, black dust, and iron filings. Sometimes you sweep, but mostly you do not. Sweeping just moves the dirt from one place to another, and the effort costs more than the result. The sweat that pours off you during the workday mixes with the smoke, forming a sticky film on your skin. You can wash your hands in the bucket at the door, but the water turns black after a single rinse, and there is no time or clean cloth for anything more. Besides, the filth is inescapable. Every tool, every surface, every breath brings a new layer. Your clothes are never truly clean. Even the best shirt, saved for feast days, is permanently stained by soot and sweat. Your work clothes, patched and threadbare, hang heavy with grease and iron dust. By midday, they are damp with sweat. By sunset, they are stiff with salt and grime. When you lie down to sleep, you can feel the grit between your shoulder blades, the tang of old sweat in your nose, the oily residue on your pillow of straw. Sometimes you notice the smell of yourself, an acrid animal scent, not entirely unpleasant, but never exactly human. It is a mix of smoke, old meat, fatigue, and earth. Your wife smells the same. Your children, running wild through mud and livestock, carry their own sweet sour version of the village's signature stench. The house is filled with the scents of bodies, broth, and burning wood. There are moments, usually after a heavy rain, when you catch a breath of something green and clean, and you realize with a pang how rare it is. Wounds are another source of odor, and a dangerous one. Burnt flesh, festering cuts, pus leaking from a poorly tended gash. These are smells you learn to fear. Infection is as common as hunger, and both are more persistent than hope. You dab wounds with vinegar, with garlic, with whatever the wise woman recommends, but sometimes the stink only grows, a warning of fever and worse. There is also the constant background of smoke. Your forge belches clouds of it into the sky, and what the wind does not carry away settles inside, clinging to the beams in your lungs. It burns your eyes, reddens your skin, fills your nose with the memory of 1,000 burnt offerings. The neighbors complain about the smoke, but they are glad enough for the work you do, and no one can afford to lose the only smith for miles. The animals add to the chaos. The blacksmith's yard is never empty of dogs, sniffing for bones, or cats slinking through the shadows, leaving their own pungent marks on everything. In summer, when the heat swells the air, the smells ripen: fermenting hay, stagnant puddles, horse urine in the dust, your own sweat turning sour before the noon bell rings. In the rare moments when you must clean yourself, you use the same soap that washes the laundry, a gray, lumpy cake made from ashes and leftover fat. It stings your skin, leaves you red and raw, and never quite banishes the deeper layers of dirt. Your wife scolds you to wash behind your ears, but you both know it is a hopeless battle. The grime is part of you, a shield against the cold and the judgment of the world. You sometimes wonder how you would be received at a nobleman's table if fate were to play some cruel joke and invite you to dine among the clean and perfumed. Would they wrinkle their noses and order you out, or simply faint dead away from the shock of your presence? You laugh to yourself at the thought, a humor as black as the forge itself, and so you live with the filth, and the filth lives with you. It is your companion, your uniform, your inescapable badge. It marks you as surely as your scars and your reputation for stubbornness. Cleanliness is for another world, another time, perhaps for someone whose hands are soft and whose days are spent in idleness. For you, there is only the dirt, the smoke, the sweat, and the endless cycle of cleaning just enough to begin getting dirty again. If you are lucky, you do not notice it most days. If you are unlucky, it is simply another reminder of how little control you have over anything, least of all the world you carry under your nails. Tomorrow will bring more work, more sweat, more filth. But tomorrow, too, you will survive. And that in this life is all that really matters. You do not remember a time before taxes. No one does. The first lesson every child learns after walking and before talking is that the world takes what it wants and then comes back for more. You do not know why you must pay the Lord for living on his land, or the church for the privilege of sinning, or the king for the accident of your birth. You only know that payment is as certain as sunrise and always twice as bitter. Taxes are not a once a year ordeal. They are an endless procession of open hands and empty purses. The steward rides in at the turning of every season, his cloak fine enough to buy your whole forge, and his face set in a frown that says he knows you are hiding something. He brings his ledger, the only book in the village thicker than the Bible, and his two guards, never smiling, never tired. The system is simple, which is to say, brutally effective. You owe the Lord for the land beneath your house, for the fields you will never own, for the privilege of drawing water from the well and grazing your goat on the village green. You owe him for every pig, every chicken, every cart and tool, even for your own right to labor and suffer. The amounts are always reasonable, but somehow you never have quite enough. You pay in coin if you are lucky, in kind if you are not. The steward accepts eggs, cheese, bundles of wood, a new blade for his knife, a horseshoe for his horse. Sometimes he demands both, the eggs and the knife, the cheese and the horseshoe. You try to argue, but argument is met with a blank stare, or worse, a mark in the ledger that says you will pay double next season. Then there is the church. The priest appears at your door on holy days and some days that are not holy at all. He blesses your house and your forge, sprinkles water over your children's heads, mutters words that sound suspiciously like curses, and then holds out his hand. The tithe is meant to be a tenth, but the priest's finger slips easily from one to another when he counts your coins or your sack of grain. You pay. because you must, and because no one wants to be the talk of the village as godless. But the most regular tax is the one you pay to the weather and fate. When the harvest fails, when the storms flatten the fields, when the livestock sicken, the Lord and the priest do not lower their demands. If anything, they come more often, with softer words but harder eyes. God will provide, the priest says, and the Lord must maintain order, says the steward. But all you see is your storehouse growing emptier and your family eating thinner meals. Sometimes you are forced to borrow seed, meat, a bit of money from the miller or the merchant in the next village. But debts are taxes by another name, and the interest they breed is as sure as weeds in spring. You patch your tools, work longer hours, take on jobs for half their worth, hoping to catch up before the next collection. But you never do. No one does. The system is built that way. And then there are the unofficial taxes, the tribute you pay to thieves and bullies. Every so often, a band of men comes through the village in the night, masked or hooded, faces hidden, but voices unmistakable. They demand bread, ale, a sharp knife, a pair of boots, a handful of coins. If you are lucky, you give them what you can, and they go. If not, something goes missing anyway. A chicken, a tool, a daughter's ring, a scrap of bacon hidden under the floor. You do not speak of these visits. To do so would invite suspicion. Perhaps you did not pay enough. Perhaps you know the men behind the masks. You learn to keep your head down, to hide the best of what you have, to pay quickly and quietly. The villagers look out for each other, but only to a point. Everyone has their own debts to settle, their own bargains with fear. In the daylight, there is also the subtle tax of favors. The steward's wife needs her kettle mended, the priest's cousin wants a new lock for his chest. They bring a smile, a promise of blessings, and sometimes a coin, but often nothing at all. You cannot refuse them, not without earning a reputation for ingratitude, which is almost as dangerous as being known for wealth. So you fix, mend, sharpen, patch. You count it as the cost of surviving, as necessary as food and firewood. On feast days and market days, the collection box sits heavy at the church door, and the children are sent to stand beside it, bright eyed and silent, to shame the last coppers from your purse. At weddings and funerals, you are expected to contribute to the meal, to the drink, to the offerings for the souls of the dead or the hope of the newly joined. Even your happiness, such as it is, comes with a price. You do not complain or not in public. You mutter in the forge, curse in the privacy of your thoughts, share a bitter laugh with neighbors at the tavern. But you pay. You always pay. The alternative is unthinkable. To refuse is to risk everything: your house, your tools, your family's safety. You have seen what happens to those who try to cheat the system. Their houses burn in mysterious fires. Their names are whispered only as warnings. Sometimes you try to imagine life without taxes. The idea is so absurd, it makes you laugh, then wince. You cannot picture a world where what you earn is yours, where your work is enough to secure your future. That kind of world exists only in stories told to children, and even then, only the most foolish children believe them. You get by with what is left. Some weeks, it is enough to buy a bit of extra food, a mug of ale, a candle to light the darkness. Other weeks, it is barely enough to keep the forge burning and your belly from gnawing at itself. You keep a hidden stash of coins, just in case, but never too many, never where anyone else might look. You try to teach your children how to live with less, how to hide their small treasures, how to keep their heads down when the collectors come. You tell them to be grateful for what they have, but you know it is a lie. Gratefulness is just another kind of payment, another thing demanded by the world. You work, you pay, you survive. Every year the taxes seem to grow. Every year you grow smaller beneath their weight. But you endure. You must. It is not much of a life, but it is yours. And as long as you can keep paying, you are still counted among the living. Tomorrow, the steward will ride in again, or the priest will come knocking, or some stranger will appear by night, and you will pay, as you always do, for the privilege of drawing breath in a world that never stops taking. It is hard to call anything a holiday when the difference between work and celebration is measured in blisters and bruises. Yet, even in a world as gray and relentless as yours, there are days set aside for something like happiness, a market fair, a church festival, a saint's day, when the whole village is, for once, not bent double beneath the weight of necessity. You feel it in the air before you see it, a kind of nervous energy running through the village. The women scrub the doorsteps and bake what little flour they have into tough, honest loaves. The children are scrubbed, their hair pulled tight, cheeks red from cold water and anticipation. Even the animals sense it. The dogs bark more, the geese strut in the yard, the chickens scatter from feet that move a little faster than usual. The forge, on these days, becomes a place of gossip and last minute requests. Someone's cartwheel needs a final tightening. A handle breaks on a bucket, a clasp on a cloak. Everyone wants something just fixed in time for the festivities. You work early, wiping sweat from your brow before the sun has burned away the mist. But there is a difference today. You know the work will end, if only for a little while. By midday, the village has transformed. Banners, faded, mended, and reused for years, flutter from the posts. A rough table appears in the square, heavy with bread, stews, and what passes for ale. The air is thick with smoke from roasting meat, laughter that has nothing to do with malice, and the rare sound of music, a pipe, a drum, a string dragged across a battered bow. You go because everyone goes. It is not wise to be absent, even if you would rather curl up in your corner and rest, even if your muscles ache and your mind rebels against the noise. You show your face. You put on your cleanest shirt, which is never really clean, and join the crowd. The first hours are awkward. You stand on the edge, nodding at neighbors you usually only see as customers or creditors. There is forced cheer in every conversation. May the Lord bless your house. A good harvest to you. Let's hope for fewer broken plows this year. You smile and reply, your words as practiced as the blows of your hammer. Underneath, you wonder how many of them will still be alive next festival. The children are the first to lose themselves in the day. They dart among the stalls, sticky fingered and bright eyed, begging sweets from the baker's wife, or daring each other to steal apples from the merchant's cart. For a few hours, they forget that their shoes are patched and their bellies are rarely full. Their laughter is sharper, lighter than you remember. You try to catch some of it for yourself, but it slips away. You find a seat, if you are lucky, a place on a bench or a patch of grass. A mug of ale appears in your hand, watered down, but better than nothing. You drink, not for thirst, but for the brief warmth it brings. Someone passes a loaf, a hunk of cheese, a rare slice of sausage. You eat without savoring. Old habits die hard. The talk, for once, is not all misery. There is boasting about imagined wealth, stories about the time the mill broke in a storm, jokes about the steward's horse and the priest's sermons. You remember, suddenly, that humor exists, that laughter is not just a reflex for pain. It feels dangerous, this laughter, like standing too close to the forge at full blaze. Sometimes there are games, sack races for the children, arm wrestling for the men, a contest of strength or luck or lying. You join if you are pressed, but your hands ache and your back is not what it once was. Still, there is pride in taking part. You are still here. That counts for something. There is dancing in the evening when the sun slips low and the sky bruises purple and red. The young people lead, eager to forget the future for a few spinning minutes. You remember dancing once, awkward and shy, stepping on toes, laughing into the dark. Your wife pulls you into the line, and for a heartbeat, you are young again, the world wide open and full of possibility. But the feeling passes. The ale runs out, the food dwindles, the music falters as the players tire. The laughter grows quieter, the arguments sharper, old grudges revived by the drink and the darkness. You watch the shadows grow, and you know it is time to leave. You walk home in the cool air, children asleep on your shoulders or stumbling ahead, wife humming a tune that will not survive the night. The house is as it was, small, cold, and waiting. You crawl into your bed of straw, head spinning with exhaustion and cheap drink. The next morning, the world will be unchanged. The mud will be just as deep, the tools just as blunt, the debts just as old. The aches in your body will be sharper for the foolishness of celebration. Your wife will mutter as she scrubs stains from shirts and shoes. The children will whine for sweets that are already gone. But for one day, you remembered what it was like to live as if the world might be kind. You saw your neighbors not just as rivals in suffering, but as fellow survivors. You tasted something like joy, quick, sharp, gone almost before you knew it was there. It is not enough to save you, but it is enough to keep you going. And in this life, sometimes that is the rarest, richest thing of all. You might think that after years of burns, cuts, exhaustion, and hunger, nothing could scare you anymore. But illness, now, that is another thing. Sickness is an enemy you cannot see, cannot outwork, cannot hammer into submission. It arrives with the changing winds, lingers in the damp corners, slips into your bed at night, and is always closer than you want to admit. You know the signs well, the way your hands start to tremble for no reason, the fever that makes your skin burn even as you shiver in the cold, the ache in your bones that feels like it has always been there, that nothing, no fire, no rest can shake. Sometimes it comes quickly, a sharp pain in the gut, a hacking cough that will not stop, a rash that spreads in angry red welts. Sometimes it comes slowly, so slowly you do not realize it has claimed you until you can barely stand. You do not remember the last time you were well. Health, like happiness, is something you only notice when it is gone. Your cough, the tightness in your chest, the odd flutter in your heart. You tell yourself it is nothing, but you know what happened to old Ludek, who coughed himself into the grave last autumn. The village is always full of stories about someone who was fine just yesterday and now lies pale and silent, candles burning at their feet. In the forge, sickness is everywhere. The wounds on your hands sometimes refuse to heal, turning hot and red, leaking pus that smells worse than anything you know. Your joints swell, your skin cracks. You tell yourself it is only the work, but you know how quickly only the work becomes an infection that spreads up the arm, across the chest, into the blood. The wise woman sells her salves and potions, but you have seen them work as often as they fail. More than once, you have seen her shake her head and whisper, "The spirits must be angry." Superstition fills every empty space that knowledge cannot reach. You carry a little iron cross on a thong around your neck, not because you believe it can stop sickness, but because your mother told you it might. Your wife hangs bunches of dried herbs above the door, swears by garlic under the pillow, marks the children's foreheads with soot at night to keep away the night air. There are whispered rules. Do not whistle after dark. Do not cut your nails on a Tuesday. Never leave a knife in bread. You keep to them because why risk it? When illness does come, the village pulls in on itself. The sick are kept at home, doors shuttered, prayers muttered over every bowl of soup. The priest is called to bless the rooms, to sprinkle water and mutter Latin that sounds important but does not cure. Sometimes he brings a relic, bone or cloth, locked in a little box, said to be holy. You do not know if it helps. You only know that hope is a medicine too, and people will swallow any remedy, however bitter. There is always the question, is it the work or is it a curse? The line between the two is thin, and sometimes it disappears altogether. When a child falls ill, you search for a reason. Too much time in the river, a chill wind at night, a fox crossing the road, a witch's glance. Blame is a balm, even when it does nothing to heal. Sometimes the sickness takes quickly, a fever, a spasm, a gasp, and gone before you can do more than light a candle and whisper a prayer. Other times it lingers, slow and wasting, gnawing at the body day by day. You watch a neighbor shrink, turn hollow eyed, skin tight over bones, breath rattling in the dark. You visit, bring a pot of soup, sit by the fire. You do not say you are afraid, but you leave quickly, wipe your hands at the door, and sleep uneasily that night. Death is a frequent guest. You do not fear it as much as you once did. It is just another part of the rhythm, like harvest, like tax, like the return of winter. But you fear the suffering, the slow decay, the helplessness. You fear the look in your children's eyes when you cough too long, or your wife's face when she touches your brow and finds it hot. After every bout of sickness, the village tells stories: who recovered, who did not, what remedies were tried, which prayers were said. You remember the names of the dead, the failures of medicine and faith, and you add another handful of superstitions to your daily routine. Salt at the threshold, bread broken with the left hand, no mirrors at night. The world outside the village is full of more terrifying stories. Whole towns emptied by fever, the pox that leaves faces marked forever, the madness that comes in with rats and fleas. You pray that those horrors will not come here, but the prayer is a hollow one. You know that one day it will be your turn, or your wife's, or your children's. You have already lost enough friends and family to know how quickly the world forgets the dead. In the meantime, you keep working. You bind your wounds. You swallow your wife's bitter teas. You pay the priest. You make offerings to saints and spirits and the old gods whispered about by the oldest villagers. You do everything, and still you know it may not be enough. But you have learned that sometimes surviving is its own kind of victory, even if it is just for one more day, one more swing of the hammer, one more morning waking up to the same unchanging world. And when death comes, you hope that the stories they tell about you are gentle, that your name is spoken with kindness, that someone lights a candle and says a prayer just in case it helps. Until then, you will obey the superstitions, swallow the potions, and work until your hands fail you. Because in a world where sickness cannot be truly fought, fear and ritual are the only armor you have left. And in the end, you will wear it as well as you can until the day it does not matter anymore. You are not old, not really, not by the years that can be counted, but time in your life is measured by something more cruel than numbers. You see it in the eyes of the travelers who pass through your village, the way they glance at you, perhaps thinking you are someone's grandfather, not the father of young children. In this world, old age is not a matter of birthdays. It is the sum of every day spent bending, lifting, hammering, carrying, until the body itself becomes a record of every hardship. 30 years, maybe a little more. You do not know for certain because the days all blur into one another, each much like the last. But you feel ancient. Your hands are gnarled, the knuckles swollen and twisted from years of gripping tools that never fit quite right. Your nails are dark with old bruises, your fingertips calloused and cracked. You catch yourself studying your hands in the dim light, wondering if they really belong to you, or if someone swapped them for a set twice your age while you slept. You remember, vaguely, being young. There was a time when you could swing the hammer from sunrise to sunset and still laugh with your friends, chase the children, dance at the feast. You would wake in the morning with only a dull ache in your muscles, nothing a deep breath of cold air could not fix. Now, every morning is a battle. You wake to pain in every joint, a stiffness in your back that makes you walk like an old man until the blood starts moving again. Some days, it never does. Your teeth are another measure of age. Each winter, each summer, you lose another. The ones that remain are chipped, yellow, and sore. You chew on one side, avoiding the sharp pain that comes with cold water, hard bread, or anything tougher than boiled cabbage. Sometimes you dream about what it would be like to eat an apple, a piece of meat, without flinching. Your eyes are going too. You have begun to squint at your work, holding the iron closer, straining to see the edge of a blade, the head of a nail. At night, you sit by the fire, rubbing your temples, hoping the pain will go away. Sometimes it does. More often, it does not. Your hearing is not much better. The constant ringing of the anvil, the roar of the forge, the shouts of customers, all of it has left a buzzing in your ears that never quite fades. Your hair has thinned, the color gone from brown to gray to a faded nothing. When you look in the polished back of a spoon, you see a face carved by years of worry and wind. Deep lines around your eyes, your mouth set in a permanent grimace of pain or concentration. You look, you realize, just like your father did at the end, and his father before him. Your body betrays you in other ways too. Once, you could lift a plow or shoe a horse without a second thought. Now, your arms tremble under loads that used to be nothing. Your knees ache with every step. Your shoulders burn after an hour at the anvil. You drop things more often. The cuts take longer to heal. The bruises last for weeks. And the smallest cold leaves you coughing for days. You try to hide it from your children, from your wife, but they see. They always see. People treat you differently too. The young men in the village, those few who have not already broken themselves on the land, call you uncle, half in respect, half in pity. The children run past you as if you are a tree stump, something to dodge but not to notice. The priest bows his head a little lower when he sees you, his prayers for health and strength more pointed than before. You try to pass on what you know. Your oldest son has begun to take up the hammer, and you see in him the strength you once had. He asks questions, sometimes, about how to temper steel or shape a blade, and you answer as best you can. But you wonder if he sees the fear in your eyes, the knowledge that you have nothing left to give but your own fading example. You hope he will learn enough before your hands can no longer hold the tools, before your mind forgets the secrets passed down from father to son. You find yourself thinking about death more often, not with dread exactly, just a tired curiosity. You have seen enough of it to know it comes for everyone sooner or later, no matter how strong or stubborn. You wonder if it will come for you in the forge, with the fire in your hands and the sound of the bellows in your ears, or if you will slip away in your bed, cold and quiet, while your wife weeps in the dark. Some days you hope for rest, not the rest of a night's sleep, but the true deep rest that only the grave can bring. But then your youngest daughter laughs, or your wife touches your shoulder, or you taste a mouthful of warm bread, and you remember, just for a moment, why you keep going. You do not expect comfort. You do not expect reward. You only hope that you have done enough to keep your family alive for another year, that your children will remember you as more than just a tired old man. You hope they will learn from your mistakes, that they will find a way to suffer a little less, though you know the world does not often allow for such things. Old age comes early for the blacksmith. You accept it because there is no alternative. You endure the pain, the weakness, the slow betrayal of your own flesh. You endure because that is what you have always done, what your father did before you, and his father before him. In the end, it is not about strength or pride. It is about surviving day by day until the world decides it is finished with you. And when that day comes, you hope only that you will have left something behind, if not a legacy, then at least a memory, a story told in the glow of the forge, in the strength of a nail, in the laughter of a child. But for now, you limp to the door, pick up your tools, and go back to work, because the world does not wait for old men, and neither does the fire. It happens slowly, and then all at once. You have seen it coming for years. The steady way your oldest son's hands grew stronger, how his shoulders widened, how his voice deepened, and his questions about iron and fire became more serious. But when the day finally comes, it still surprises you. You wake, as always, with the dawn, your back a ruin of old aches, your fingers numb, your mouth dry. You rise slower now, every movement a quiet rebellion, and when you look across the room, you see your son is already awake. He stands by the door, half in shadow, pulling on the old shirt you wore at his age. It is patched in 3 places, and still it barely fits his arms. You remember your own father's shirt, how it hung on you, heavy with the smell of sweat and iron and worry. You watch as your son stretches his fingers, flexes his hands, rolls his neck. He is not a child anymore. You do not need to say anything. The knowledge passes from you to him without words, as it always has. There is no ceremony, no blessing, no speech, only the silent understanding that today, like every day, someone must face the fire. The forge greets you both with its usual cold, still darkness. For a moment, you remember how it looked the first time you saw it, an impossible place, alive with mystery and threat. Your son moves ahead of you, pushes open the warped door, breathes in the ancient smoke, and looks around as if seeing it for the first time, too. You feel a pang of something that is not quite pride, not quite sorrow. He goes to the tools, picks up the hammer, the same one you took from your father, the one with the splintered handle and the head worn smooth. He tests its weight, as you did, and you see him hesitate, just for a moment, as if listening for some voice in the stone, the wood, the iron. He glances at you, searching your face for approval or instruction. You nod. He nods back. You sit on the old stool, hands resting on your knees. The pain in your back is sharper this morning, and your eyes water with the smoke, but you do not move. You watch as your son kneels by the hearth, pokes at the ashes, searches for embers. You want to tell him the secret, that the trick is not in the way you stack the wood or in the angle of the bellows, but in the patience to keep trying, to coax life from what seems dead. But he does not ask, and you do not speak. He fumbles at first. The kindling is damp. The spark refuses to catch. You remember your own failures, the curses you bit back, the times you nearly gave up. Your son mutters under his breath, blows on the embers, tries again. After a while, a thin thread of smoke rises, then a flicker, then a flame. He smiles, only for a second, and you allow yourself the smallest smile in return. The day passes as all days do. The village brings its troubles, its broken things, its endless needs. Your son listens, as you did, nods gravely, promises to try. He burns his hand on the iron, curses softly, then plunges it in the water and tries again. You watch as he learns the old lessons, how the metal lies to you, how the fire can be friend or enemy, how no one is ever truly satisfied with what you make. You help when you can, steadying a blade, adjusting the bellows, showing how to judge the color of the iron. But your strength is gone quickly, and before long you find yourself sitting again, just watching, hands idle, heart heavy and light at the same time. You see the way the villagers look at your son, first with doubt, then with hope, then with the same tired gratitude they once reserved for you. At home, your wife notices the change. She pours your stew first, but your son's bowl is fuller. The children follow him when he speaks. You are not jealous, not really. This is the way of things. The world takes and takes, and then once in a while gives back. You feel yourself becoming a shadow in your own home, but you are too tired to mind. The seasons turn, and your son grows stronger, surer. His hands are not yet marked with your scars, but they will be. His back is straight for now. His eyes are clear. You see him laughing sometimes, real laughter, not the bitter bark that has replaced your own. You hope he will keep that laughter, at least for a few more years. People say the forge belongs to him now. You do not correct them. You walk slower, spend more time in the sunlight, watching the clouds or feeding the chickens. You still remember every trick, every story, but the hammer is no longer yours to lift. Sometimes your son brings you a piece of work. What do you think, Father? And you run your fingers over the metal, nod, say a word or two, but you know, and he knows, that the work is his now. One evening, as the sun sets and the last smoke drifts from the forge, you sit together on the stoop, silent. He asks if you ever wanted another life. You laugh, cough, and shake your head. Wanting is for the young, you say. This was the life I had. I tried to live it. He nods, and you see the worry in his eyes, the fear that the world will grind him down, too. You put a hand on his shoulder, feel the strength there, the warmth. It will be hard, you say, harder than you can know, but you will manage. You will keep going. That is all any of us can do. You realize as night falls that this is how it goes, always. Fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, the same burdens passed down with the same silent hope that maybe, just maybe, something will change. But the forge is still there, the work is still there, the world is still there. You close your eyes and let the sounds of the night carry you, crickets in the grass, the distant lowing of cattle, your son's quiet breathing. Tomorrow he will wake before you. He will stoke the fire. He will mend the plows, shape the nails, answer the villagers' complaints. He will come home tired, but alive. You have done all you could. You have given everything you had. The world, pitiless and indifferent, moves on. But for a moment, in the flicker of firelight and the hush of the evening, you allow yourself to hope, not for yourself, but for your son and his son after him. Because in this life, that is all that endures, the work, the struggle, and the stubborn spark that refuses to die, no matter how many times the world tries to snuff it out. The circle closes and then begins again.